The billionaire's baby crawled to the maid at a party. What happened next shocked everyone. The Whitmore estate gleamed under 1,000 carefully positioned lights, each one chosen to cast the kind of glow that made champagne bubbles look like liquid diamonds. It was the social event of the Manhattan spring season, Theodore Whitmore's return to society after 2 years of self-imposed isolation following his wife's tragic death. The guest list read like a Forbes billionaire registry. Women in couture gowns glided across marble floors, their laughter practiced and musical, their eyes sharp with calculation. Everyone knew that 35-year-old Theodore Whitmore, tech mogul, grieving widower, and father to 18-month-old Emma, was the city's most eligible bachelor. And tonight, he'd finally opened his doors again. "Theodore, darling, you simply must tell me about your new venture in sustainable energy," purred Victoria Ashford, positioning herself strategically near the grand piano where Theodore stood with a small circle of admirers. Her hand touched his arm with studied casualness, fingers lingering just a moment too long. Theodore smiled politely, the same measured smile he'd perfected over the past 2 years, warm enough to seem engaged, distant enough to discourage deeper connection. "It's still in early stages, Victoria. Nothing worth discussing at a party." "Oh, but I'm fascinated by your mind," she insisted, moving closer. "And little Emma must be so excited to have her daddy back in the world. Where is the precious angel?" As if on cue, a soft gurgling sound came from the corner of the grand ballroom. Emma sat in an elaborate playpen, surrounded by toys that cost more than most people's monthly rent. But the toddler ignored the designer playthings, her dark eyes, so like her late mother's, tracking movement across the room with unusual intensity for a child so young. Theodore's assistant, Marcus, hovered nearby, occasionally glancing at Emma while managing the flow of guests. "She's been remarkably calm tonight, Mr. Whitmore," he'd reported earlier. "Hasn't fussed once." But Emma wasn't calm. She was searching. Near the service entrance, partially hidden by an ornate screen, stood Rosa Martinez. At 43, she'd worked as household staff in Manhattan's elite homes for over 20 years, invisible to most of the people whose homes she cleaned, whose children she sometimes watched, whose secrets she accidentally witnessed. Tonight, she was part of the catering team, hired through an agency to serve drinks and clear plates. Rosa had tried to refuse this particular job when she'd seen the address. Her hands had actually trembled when she'd read Whitmore Estate on the assignment sheet. She'd called the agency, claimed she was sick, made excuses. But they'd been desperate, short-staffed, and insistent. The pay was triple the normal rate. She needed the money. Her mother's medical bills had been piling up since the diagnosis. So here she was, in the black and white uniform of the invisible, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, keeping her head down, praying she could get through the evening without being noticed. Praying that the baby wouldn't. "More champagne?" she murmured to a group of women clustered near a Renaissance painting worth more than Rosa would earn in 10 lifetimes. "Oh, finally," one of them said without looking at Rosa's face. "The service has been dreadfully slow." Rosa distributed glasses with practiced efficiency, then retreated toward the kitchen. But as she passed near the playpen, she felt it, that pull, that awareness that had haunted her nightmares for 18 months. Emma had seen her. The toddler's eyes locked onto Rosa's face with recognition that defied logic, defied the neat story Theodore Whitmore had told the world about his daughter's first year of life. Emma's small hands gripped the edge of the playpen, her whole body suddenly alert, oriented toward the woman in the servant's uniform trying desperately to disappear into the background. Rosa walked faster, nearly fleeing to the kitchen. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Just a few more hours, she told herself. Just get through tonight. But Emma Whitmore had other plans. Back in the ballroom, the party swirled on. Melinda Chun, a venture capitalist in a scarlet gown, had claimed Theodore's attention now, discussing market trends while angling her body to display her best side. Across the room, Sophia Loren adjusted her diamond necklace and plotted her approach, waiting for the perfect moment to introduce the topic of her charity gala and how wonderful it would be if Theodore and Emma attended together. What a beautiful photo opportunity. What a perfect image of a man ready to move forward. They all wanted the same thing, to be the woman who helped Theodore Whitmore heal, who stepped into the role of mother to that poor, motherless child. The woman who would share his fortune, his influence, his beautiful homes. None of them had ever actually held Emma. None of them had changed her diaper or soothed her nighttime tears. In their practiced pitches and strategic approaches, Emma was a prop, a sympathetic detail in Theodore's biography, a child who would undoubtedly have nannies to handle the messy reality of motherhood. Theodore knew this on some level. He wasn't naive. But the loneliness of the past 2 years had worn him down in ways he hadn't anticipated. The empty bed, the silent dinners, the weight of raising Emma alone. It had all created a hollow space inside him that these women promised to fill. He'd loved his wife, Catherine, with an intensity that had surprised him. They'd met in graduate school, before the money, before the empire. She'd loved him when he was just a kid with big ideas and student loans. Her death from complications during Emma's birth had shattered something fundamental in him. But life moved forward. Emma was growing. And maybe, he thought, watching Victoria laugh at something Marcus said, maybe it was time to try again. Maybe Emma needed a mother figure. Maybe he needed a partner. The rationalization felt hollow, even as he thought it. At 8:47 p.m., Rosa emerged from the kitchen with another tray of champagne. She'd steadied herself, pressed down the panic, reminded herself of all the reasons she had to stay silent. This was just one night. After tonight, she'd never have to see Theodore Whitmore or his daughter again. And that's when Emma made her move. The toddler had been watching, waiting with the strange patience of very young children who want something desperately. She'd seen Rosa return to the ballroom. And 18-month-old Emma Whitmore, who had only recently begun to walk, dropped her hands and knees and crawled with determined purpose toward the edge of the playpen. Marcus, distracted by a guest asking for directions to the restroom, didn't notice as Emma maneuvered herself over the low barrier, a barrier that had been deliberately kept low because Emma had seemed content to stay in her designated space all evening. Not anymore. Emma hit the marble floor with a soft thud, paused for just a moment, then began crawling across the ballroom with single-minded determination. Her small hands and knees moved in perfect rhythm, carrying her past designer shoes and couture gowns, past tables laden with caviar and lobster, past all the beautiful, perfumed women who had been vying for her father's attention. She crawled directly toward Rosa Martinez. The first person to notice was Melinda Chin. She'd been in mid-sentence, discussing cryptocurrency trends, when movement on the floor caught her peripheral vision. "Theodore," she said, touching his arm. "I think Emma's gotten out of." But her words died as everyone in the immediate vicinity turned to watch the extraordinary scene unfolding. Emma Whitmore, the child who had been described by her nannies as unusually reserved and not particularly affectionate, was crawling across the ballroom floor with tears streaming down her face, small sobs building in her throat. And she wasn't heading toward her father or any of the elegantly dressed women who had been cooing over her from a distance all evening. She was crawling straight toward the maid with the champagne tray. "Emma," Theodore called out, moving quickly toward his daughter. But Emma didn't even glance in his direction. Her eyes were locked on Rosa, who had frozen in place, her face drained of all color. The ballroom fell silent, conversation stopping in ripples as more guests noticed the drama. All eyes turned to watch the billionaire's daughter crawling across the floor, crying now, arms reaching toward a woman in a server's uniform who looked like she might faint. Rosa stood paralyzed, the champagne tray trembling in her hands. She wanted to run, wanted to disappear, but her feet wouldn't move. And Emma kept coming, kept crawling, the sound of the baby's crying growing louder, more desperate. "Please," Rosa whispered, though whether she was speaking to God, to Emma, or to herself, she couldn't say. "Please no." Emma reached Rosa's feet and immediately lifted her arms in the universal gesture of a child wanting to be picked up. Her small hands grasped at Rosa's black uniform pants, her crying intensifying into full sobs that echoed through the now silent ballroom. "Up," Emma cried, one of her few words. "Up, up, up." Theodore reached them, confusion and concern etched on his face. "I'm so sorry," he said to Rosa, bending to pick up his daughter. "Emma, sweetheart, come to Daddy." But when Theodore tried to lift her, Emma did something she'd never done before. She fought. Her small body went rigid, and she screamed, a sound of such pure anguish that several guests gasped. She twisted away from her father, reaching frantically for Rosa, her cries becoming almost hysterical. "Up, up," Emma sobbed, her whole body straining toward the maid who stood frozen like a statue. Rosa's hands shook so hard the champagne glasses clinked against each other. She kept her eyes down, not daring to look at Theodore, not daring to look at Emma, even as the child's cries pierced her heart like knives. "I'm sorry, sir," Rosa managed to say, her voice barely audible. I need to return to the kitchen." She tried to step away, but Emma's grip on her pants was surprisingly strong. The toddler held on with desperate determination, screaming louder when Rosa attempted to move. Victoria Ashford materialized at Theodore's side, her expression a perfect blend of concern and opportunity. "Poor darling is probably overtired," she said, reaching for Emma. "Let me help." Emma's screams reached a new pitch of terror when Victoria's hands came near. The child threw herself backward, nearly falling, still clutching Rosa's uniform, still crying with a desperation that was breaking hearts throughout the ballroom. I don't understand," Theodore said, looking helplessly at his daughter. He'd seen Emma fuss before, seen her cry, but never like this. Never with such raw, desperate need. "She's never." "Please," Rosa said again, louder this time, tears now running down her own face. "Please, I can't." But Emma wouldn't let go. And as the seconds stretched into a minute, as the entire ballroom watched in stunned silence, Rosa felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. Marcus appeared at Theodore's elbow. "Sir, maybe if we perhaps the young lady could hold her for a moment? Just until she calms down." "No," Rosa said quickly, panic in her voice. "No, I can't. Please don't make me." "She's terrified," Theodore said, looking at Emma's red, tear-streaked face with growing alarm. "I've never seen her like this. What's wrong with her?" A society matron in a purple gown spoke up from the crowd. "Perhaps the child recognizes her from somewhere? Maybe she was a previous nanny. Or maybe," Sophia Loren said with a slight edge to her voice, "there's something we're not being told." The implication hung in the air. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd. Rosa could feel dozens of eyes on her, judgment and speculation radiating from the wealthy guests like heat. Emma's sobs were beginning to make her hiccup, her small body shaking with the force of her crying. She'd never let go of Rosa's pants, and her free arms still reached upward, pleading. "Mama." Emma suddenly cried out, the word unclear but unmistakable. "Mama, mama." The ballroom went completely silent. Theodore's face went white. "What did she say?" "She's confused," Victoria said quickly. "Babies that age often." "Mama." Emma cried again, louder, looking directly at Rosa's face. "Mama, up." Rosa's knees buckled. The champagne tray crashed to the floor, crystal shattering in an explosion of glass and golden liquid. She would have fallen if Theodore hadn't caught her arm, his grip firm, his eyes suddenly sharp and demanding. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "How does my daughter know you?" "I'm no one," Rosa gasped, trying to pull away. "Please, I'm just here to serve." "I don't." But Emma answered for her. With a final, desperate lunge, the toddler threw herself from her father's arms toward Rosa. Theodore, shocked, instinctively loosened his grip, and Emma landed against Rosa's legs, wrapping her small arms around the maid's knees, pressing her tear-soaked face against the black fabric of the uniform. And in that moment, Rosa's resolve shattered completely. 18 months of secrets, of pain, of forcing herself to walk away from the child she'd held for the first 3 months of her life. It all broke apart like the crystal champagne glasses scattered across the marble floor. Rosa dropped to her knees. Her hands that had been rigid with fear, suddenly moved with practiced, gentle familiarity as they reached for Emma. The toddler immediately launched herself into Rosa's arms, wrapping small hands around her neck, pressing close with a contentment that was visible to everyone watching. Emma's sobs quieted immediately. She buried her face in Rosa's shoulder and held on like a person who'd been drowning and had finally found solid ground. Rosa held the child against her chest, rocking slightly, one hand cradling Emma's head while the other supported her small body, a hold so natural, so practiced, that it told a story all its own. Tears streamed down Rosa's face as she whispered in Spanish, words of comfort she'd thought she'd never be allowed to say again. Lo siento, mi amor. Lo siento mucho. Estoy aquí. Estoy aquí. The ballroom erupted. Voices rose in shock and speculation. Camera phones appeared despite the no photography rule. Marcus tried to restore order, but the dam had broken. Theodore stood motionless, watching the woman he didn't know hold his daughter with a kind of gentle expertise that spoke of countless hours together. Emma had stopped crying completely, had relaxed in Rosa's arms in a way she never relaxed with anyone. Not the nannies, not him, not any of the well-meaning relatives who'd tried to help over the past year. I need everyone to leave, Theodore said suddenly, his voice cutting through the chaos.
Now.
Theodore, really, I think we should, Victoria began. Now, he repeated louder. Marcus, clear the room. Everyone out. The guests protested, not wanting to miss whatever revelation was coming, but Marcus and the security team were efficient. Within 15 minutes, the ballroom had emptied of everyone except Theodore, Emma, Rosa, and Marcus standing discreetly by the door. Rosa sat on the floor, still holding Emma, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder with the suddenness of a child who'd expended all her emotional energy. Rosa stroked the baby's dark curls with shaking fingers, memorizing the feel of her, knowing these might be the last moments she'd ever hold this child. Theodore pulled up a chair and sat down, his eyes never leaving Rosa's face. When he spoke, his voice was controlled but laced with 1,000 questions. Start talking, he said. And don't lie to me. Who are you, and what is my daughter to you? Rosa looked down at Emma's sleeping face, at the peaceful expression the child wore for the first time that evening, and knew there was no more running. The truth had caught up to her in the most public, devastating way possible. But as she gathered her courage to speak, she realized something that made her heart ache even more. She didn't regret what she was about to confess. She only regretted the pain it was about to cause. My name is Rosa Martinez, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. And 18 months ago, I was your wife's private nurse. Theodore's expression didn't change, but she saw his hands grip the arms of his chair. Catherine never mentioned a private nurse. She hired me through a discreet agency 3 weeks before Emma's birth. She didn't want you to worry. Rosa's throat tightened. Mrs. Whitmore had been having complications her regular doctors weren't taking seriously enough. She was scared, Mr. Whitmore. So scared. What kind of complications? Theodore's voice cracked slightly. Her blood pressure was dangerously high. There were signs of preeclampsia that she said the doctors kept dismissing as normal pregnancy symptoms. Rosa shifted carefully, making sure Emma stayed comfortable. She found me through a friend's recommendation. I'd worked in obstetric care for 15 years before transitioning to private nursing. She wanted someone with experience who would actually listen to her concerns. Why didn't she tell me? Theodore stood abruptly, pacing. I would have hired the best specialists, changed doctors, anything.
She knew that, sir.
But she also knew you were in the middle of your biggest product launch. She saw how much stress you were under. She wanted. Rosa's voice broke. She wanted to protect you from worrying. She thought she could manage it until after the launch, and then she'd tell you everything. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Theodore turned away, his shoulders tense. The night Emma was born, Rosa continued, needing to get it all out now. Mrs. Whitmore called me in a panic. You were at that conference in Tokyo. She said she felt wrong, that something was very wrong. I came immediately. By the time I arrived, she was in active labor and her blood pressure was through the ceiling. I called 911, but she died anyway, Theodore finished, his voice hollow. The doctors said it was sudden, that there was nothing anyone could have done. That's not entirely true, sir. Rosa forced herself to meet his eyes when he whirled around. If she'd been properly monitored in the weeks before, if her symptoms had been taken more seriously, there might have been interventions. But by the time she went into labor, it was too late. The eclampsia, it was catastrophic. Theodore sank back into his chair, his face ashen. You were there? You were with her when she died? Yes, sir. I rode in the ambulance with her. I held her hand. Tears flowed freely down Rosa's face now. Her last words were about Emma. She made me promise to make sure the baby was okay. She was hemorrhaging, barely conscious, and all she could think about was making sure Emma would be safe. And Emma? Was she? Theodore couldn't finish the question. Emma was born via emergency C-section. She was premature, underweight, struggling to breathe. They put her in the NICU immediately. Rosa looked down at the sleeping child in her arms, so healthy now, so perfect. I stayed, Mr. Whitmore. I know I had no right, but I'd promised Mrs. Whitmore. You were on a plane somewhere over the Pacific, unreachable. The baby had no one. So I stayed. The hospital never mentioned. I told them I was a family friend hired help. In the chaos of trying to save your wife and then the emergency with Emma, no one questioned it. And when you arrived... Rosa paused, the memory painful. You were destroyed, sir. Absolutely shattered. You could barely function. The nurses, the doctors, everyone was concerned about you. You couldn't even hold Emma, at first. The grief was too overwhelming. Theodore's hands covered his face. I remember. Those first few days are a blur. I couldn't understand how Catherine was just gone. How I was supposed to be a father when my wife... His voice broke completely. You had your family, your assistants, everyone trying to help you through it, Rosa said gently. But Emma was still in the NICU, still struggling. Premature babies need constant care, constant touch. The nurses were wonderful, but they were stretched thin. She swallowed hard. I took a leave for my other cases. I told the agency I had a family emergency, and I spent every day in that NICU, holding Emma, talking to her, making sure she was never alone. For how long? Theodore asked, his voice muffled by his hands. 3 months, sir. Until she was strong enough to come home, and then a week after that to make sure the transition was smooth. Theodore lowered his hands slowly, staring at Rosa with an expression she couldn't quite read. 3 months. You cared for my daughter for 3 months, and I never knew. You came to the NICU when you could, but you weren't yourself, Mr. Whitmore. The grief, the medication the doctors had you on to help you sleep, the funeral arrangements, running your company, you were barely surviving. When you came, you'd hold Emma for a few minutes, but then you'd break down and have to leave. No one blamed you. Everyone understood. But you were there. All the time. Yes, sir. Rosa's voice was barely audible. I was there. I fed her, changed her, held her through the night terrors that premature babies sometimes have. I sang to her in Spanish, the same songs my mother sang to me. I learned her cries, what each one meant. I was there for her first real smile, her first time sleeping through the night, her first. Rosa's voice broke. I'm sorry. I had no right to those moments. She wasn't my child. Then why? Theodore leaned forward, his eyes intense. Why dedicate 3 months of your life to a stranger's baby? Because I promised her mother, Rosa said simply. And because Emma needed someone. She was so tiny, so fragile. She'd lost her mother before she even got to know her. Someone had to make sure she felt loved, felt safe, felt wanted during those first crucial months. I couldn't bring Mrs. Whitmore back, but I could keep my promise to her. Emma stirred in Rosa's arms, making small sleeping sounds. Rosa automatically adjusted her position, rocking slightly, humming a soft tune. The movements were so natural, so maternal, that Theodore felt something crack open in his chest. What happened after 3 months? He asked quietly.
You were doing better by then.
You'd hired a full-time nanny, Mrs. Patterson. She was wonderful, qualified, everything Emma needed. And you were finally ready to be a father to her. Really ready. Rosa's voice trembled. So I left. I never told you who I was or what I'd done because I didn't want to complicate things. You were building a life with your daughter. You didn't need some stranger claiming a connection to her. But you were more than a stranger to Emma. She was 3 months old, sir. I thought she'd forget me in a few weeks. Rosa laughed bitterly. I underestimated a child's memory, especially a child who'd bonded during those critical early months. But I told myself it was for the best. I went back to my regular work, tried to move on. You said your mother is sick? Theodore's question was unexpected. Rosa looked up, surprised. Yes, sir. Cancer. The treatment is expensive, and my insurance doesn't cover everything. That's why I took this catering job tonight, even though I knew it was your home. The agency was desperate, the pay was triple the normal rate, and I hoped, that Emma was too young to remember me. That I could just serve drinks, avoid her, and get through the evening. But she did remember. Theodore looked at his daughter, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months in someone else's arms. All this time, I thought she was just a difficult baby. She wouldn't bond with the nannies, wouldn't really warm to anyone. We've gone through 4 different caregivers in the past year because she was so unhappy. The doctors said it was normal, that some children are just more reserved. But it wasn't that, was it? I don't know, sir. I'm not a child psychologist, but you know her. You know what her cries mean, how to hold her, how to comfort her. Theodore's voice was thick with emotion. She called you Mama, Rosa. My daughter, who barely speaks, called you Mama. I'm sorry, Rosa whispered. I never wanted to confuse her or... Don't apologize. Theodore stood abruptly. Don't you dare apologize for loving my daughter when she needed love. For being there when I couldn't be. For keeping a promise to my wife that I didn't even know she'd asked for. He paced again, his mind clearly racing. Rosa stayed silent, holding Emma, wondering what would happen next. Would he call the police? Accuse her of something? Ban her from ever seeing Emma again? I need to know something, Theodore said finally, turning to face her. When you left after those 3 months, did you want to leave? Or did you make yourself leave because you thought it was the right thing to do? Rosa closed her eyes, the truth ripping through her. It destroyed me, she admitted. Every day for months afterward, I cried myself to sleep. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, reaching for a baby who wasn't there. I'd hear crying in my dreams and jolt awake, ready to comfort her, only to remember she wasn't mine to comfort anymore. I'd see mothers with babies in the park and have to leave before I broke down. I loved her, Mr. Whitmore. God help me, I loved her like she was my own flesh and blood. And walking away from her was the hardest thing I've ever done. Then why did you do it? Because she's your daughter. Rosa's voice rose for the first time. Because you're her father, and you have every right to raise her without some paid caregiver claiming a piece of her heart. Because I had no legal right to her, no blood connection, no claim except 3 months of care that you never even asked for. Because staying would have been selfish, would have confused her, would have made everything so much more complicated. Or, Theodore said quietly, because you thought someone like you couldn't possibly have a place in the life of someone like me. Rosa's head snapped up, but she couldn't deny it. It was true. What place did a working-class Latina nurse have in the life of a billionaire and his daughter? She told herself she was doing the noble thing by leaving, but underneath it all, she believed she wasn't good enough to stay. That's what I thought, Theodore said, reading her silence correctly. Rosa, do you know what tonight's party was really about? She shook her head, confused by the change in topic. It was my family and friends trying to push me back into the dating world. All those women you saw tonight, they were carefully vetted potential matches. Society ladies who could give Emma a proper mother figure, who could slide into Catherine's role without too much disruption to my life. He laughed bitterly. And my daughter saw right through all of them. She knew none of them really cared about her. None of them knew her. None of them were you. Mr. Whitmore, in 3 months, you gave my daughter something I've spent the last year trying to hire people to provide. Genuine love. Not duty, not a paycheck, not social climbing, just pure, Unconditional love. Theodore's eyes were bright with unshed tears. And I sent you away without even knowing you existed. I let you walk out of her life because I was too broken to see what was happening right in front of me. You were grieving your wife. No one could expect. I was supposed to protect my daughter. That's the one job I had as her father, and I failed. I was so lost in my own pain that I didn't notice she was losing someone crucial to her development, someone who loved her. He looked at Emma, sleeping so peacefully in Rosa's arms. Look at her. I haven't seen her that relaxed in months. She knows, Rosa. Somehow, some way, she knows you're safe. You're home. The next hour passed in a strange, suspended reality. Theodore insisted Rosa move to the more comfortable sitting room, where Emma continued sleeping peacefully in her arms. Marcus brought tea and quietly excused himself, sensing this was a conversation that needed privacy. Theodore called Emma's current nanny, Mrs. Patterson, and told her to take the weekend off. Then he did something that shocked Rosa even more. He called his lawyer. I need you to listen carefully, he told the attorney, his eyes never leaving Rosa's face. I need you to research employment law, specifically around childcare providers. Full-time live-in positions. I need to know what would be required to hire someone who has no formal credentials, but extensive experience. And I need to know about immigration status, legal protections, everything. I'll send you details tomorrow, but start researching tonight. After he hung up, Rosa finally found her voice. Mr. Whitmore, what are you doing? I'm trying to figure out how to make this right, he said simply. How to give Emma back what I took from her without even realizing it. You can't just... I'm not qualified to be a full-time nanny. I'm a nurse. I have other clients, other responsibilities. Which you took time away from to care for Emma before. Could you do it again? That was different. That was temporary, a promise to a dying woman. And this is a promise to a living child who clearly needs you. Theodore leaned forward, his intensity almost frightening. Rosa, I know this is crazy. I know we've only just met, really met. I know this is all happening too fast. But look at her. They both looked at Emma, who had her small fist curled around Rosa's finger, even in sleep. She's been unhappy for a year, Theodore continued. Crying more than usual, not bonding with caregivers, not developing as quickly as the doctors said she should. They kept telling me it was normal variation, that some children are just more reserved. But it wasn't normal. She was grieving, Rosa. She was grieving the loss of you. Babies that young can't. Can't they? You said yourself you were with her every day, for 3 months. You were the constant in her life during her most vulnerable period. You bonded with her, and she bonded with you. And then suddenly you were gone, and no amount of qualified nannies could replace what she lost. Rosa felt tears sliding down her cheeks again. Even if what you're saying is true, even if she does remember me, need me somehow, I can't just append my entire life and move into your house. It's not that simple. Why not? Because Rosa stood carefully, still holding Emma, needing to move. Because you're Theodore Whitmore, billionaire, society figure, and I'm Rosa Martinez, a nurse who cleans houses on the side to pay her mother's medical bills. Because your world and my world don't mix. Because those women at your party tonight, they'd eat me alive. Because I don't belong here. Emma thinks you do. Emma is 18 months old. She doesn't understand. She understands that you love her, that you kept her safe when she was most vulnerable, that you've been the missing piece in her life. Theodore stood too, moving closer. And honestly, Rosa, right now I don't give a damn what society thinks or what those women at the party would say. My daughter has been unhappy for a year, and for the first time since you left, she's at peace. That's all that matters to me. What about your wife? What would she think about you bringing some stranger into her home, into her daughter's life? You're not a stranger. You're the woman Catherine trusted with her final wish. You're the person she chose to protect our daughter. Theodore's voice softened. And if Catherine could see Emma right now, see how peaceful she is in your arms, I think she'd be grateful. I think she'd want this. Rosa looked down at Emma, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. It would be so easy to say yes. So easy to let herself sink into the fantasy of being part of this child's life permanently. But the practical realities crowded her mind. "I need to think," she said finally. "This is too much, too fast. I need time to process." "I understand. But Rosa?" Theodore waited until she met his eyes. "Don't make the same mistake you made before. Don't walk away because you think you're not good enough or because you think you don't belong. If you need to leave for other reasons, I'll accept that. But don't leave because of shame or fear." Before Rosa could respond, Emma stirred and woke up. The toddler blinked sleepy eyes, looked at Rosa's face, and smiled. A pure, joyful smile that transformed her small features. Then she noticed her father standing nearby and, to Theodore's shock, reached out for him without crying. "Dada," Emma said clearly, one of her precious few words. Theodore took his daughter carefully, and Emma settled against his chest without fuss for the first time in months. But she kept one small hand stretched toward Rosa, maintaining contact, as if afraid the woman would disappear if she let go. "See," Theodore said softly. "She wants both of us. She needs both of us." Rosa watched father and daughter together, saw how Emma was finally relaxed even in Theodore's arms because Rosa was still there, still present. The child had both her father and the woman she remembered as her earliest source of comfort and safety. For Emma, the world was finally complete. "I have conditions," Rosa heard herself say, hardly believing the words coming from her mouth. "If I even consider this, and I'm not saying yes yet, but if I consider it, I have conditions." "Name them." "First, my mother. She lives with me, and she's sick. I can't abandon her care. We have a guest house. She can live there, and I'll hire the best medical team in the city to manage her care. I won't take charity." "It's not charity. It's part of your compensation package." Theodore shifted Emma to his other arm. "What else?" "I need to maintain my nursing license. I need to keep up with my certifications. This can't be. I can't become so dependent on this position that I have nothing if it ends." "Agreed. We'll work around your certification requirements. What else?" Rosa took a deep breath. "I need to know this is about Emma, only about Emma. I won't be. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm not one of those women from tonight trying to." "Rosa." Theodore's voice was firm but kind. "I just lost my wife 18 months ago. I'm barely holding myself together. The last thing on my mind is romance. This is about my daughter getting the care she needs from someone who genuinely loves her. Nothing more. And if you do meet someone, if you remarry, I won't be edged out and replaced because some new wife doesn't like the hired help being too close to the child. Then we put it in writing. A contract that protects your position as Emma's caregiver regardless of any changes in my personal life. My lawyer can draw something up." "I need to think about it," Rosa repeated, but her resistance was weakening. "I need at least a few days to." Emma chose that moment to reach for Rosa again, making distressed sounds when Rosa didn't immediately take her. Theodore handed his daughter back, and Emma immediately relaxed, laying her head on Rosa's shoulder with a contented sigh. "She's already decided," Theodore said quietly. "The question is, can you let yourself believe you deserve to be part of her life?" That night, Rosa left the Whitmore estate at midnight with Theodore's business card in her pocket and Emma's tearful cries ringing in her ears as Rosa had forced herself to leave. She'd promised to call in 3 days with her decision. She took the subway back to her small apartment in Queens, where her mother was already asleep. Rosa sat at the kitchen table until dawn, staring at Theodore's card, thinking about Emma's smile, remembering the feel of that small body relaxed and trusting in her arms. The practical side of her brain listed all the reasons this was a terrible idea: the cultural divide, the power imbalance, the risk of getting too attached and eventually losing Emma again, the complications it would create in her life. But her heart remembered the promise she'd made to Catherine Whitmore. The promise to keep Emma safe, to make sure she was okay. And Emma wasn't okay. She'd been struggling for a year, searching for the connection she'd lost, unable to understand why the person who'd been her whole world had suddenly vanished. Rosa had walked away once before, thinking it was the noble thing to do. Had it been? Or had it been cowardice disguised as nobility? By sunrise, Rosa had made her decision. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to Theodore. I need to see the contract first. I need everything in writing. But if you're serious about this, if this is really about Emma and giving her stability, then my answer is yes. When do you need me to start? The response came within minutes, as if Theodore had been awake all night too. The contract will be ready by Monday. As for when to start, would today be too soon? Emma cried for 3 hours after you left last night. She needs you, Rosa. Please come home. Rosa read the message 3 times, her hands shaking. Home. He'd said, come home, as if she'd ever belonged in that mansion, in that world, in that child's life. But maybe, she thought, remembering Emma's smile and the peace on that small face, maybe she did belong there. Not because of money or status or society's approval, but because a little girl needed her. And sometimes, that was the only belonging that mattered. She began packing her bags. The first weeks were harder than Rosa had anticipated. Moving into the Whitmore Estates guest house with her mother required adjustments on all sides. Her mother, Maria, was initially scandalized by the whole arrangement. Mija, you're moving in with a man you don't know? Maria had protested, even as she surveyed the guest house that was larger than their entire queen's apartment. What will people say? They'll say I'm doing my job, Mama. Taking care of a child who needs me. And what about when he brings home a new wife? What then? It was a question Rosa asked herself daily during those first weeks, even as she and Emma fell back into their old rhythms as if the year apart had never happened. Theodore kept his distance, professional and polite, but she could see him watching sometimes, observing the easy way Emma came to her, the trust that had survived their separation. The household staff, the real household staff, the permanent employees, were another challenge. Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, had served the Whitmore family for 20 years and initially viewed Rosa with barely concealed suspicion. I've seen many nannies come and go, Mrs. Chun said pointedly during Rosa's first week. Usually they last about 3 months before they realize Mr. Whitmore isn't interested in their romantic intentions. That's good, Rosa replied calmly, folding Emma's laundry. Because I'm not interested in romance. I'm interested in caring for Emma. Mrs. Chen's tone suggested she'd heard that before. But actions spoke louder than words. Rosa showed up every day at 6 a.m., even though her official hours didn't start until 7. She stayed late when Emma was fussy, never watching the clock or calculating overtime. She learned the household routines without complaint, respected the other staff members' territories, and never once tried to overstep her position as Emma's caregiver. Emma, meanwhile, flourished. The change in her was dramatic enough that even the pediatrician commented on it during her 18-month checkup. Whatever you've been doing differently, Mr. Whitmore, keep doing it, Dr. Reeves said, watching Emma babble happily to Rosa in the corner of the examination room. Her developmental markers are all improving. She's more verbal, more social, more engaged. The difference from 6 months ago is remarkable. Theodore looked at Rosa, who was playing peekaboo with Emma, making the toddler giggle with delight. We made some staffing changes, he said simply. Well, they're working. This is a different child. It wasn't just Emma who was changing. Theodore found himself rearranging his schedule to be home for Emma's bedtime, something he'd rarely managed before. He'd arrive just as Rosa was starting the bedtime routine and would watch, fascinated, as she transformed what had been a nightly battle into a peaceful ritual. Rosa would give Emma a bath, singing softly in Spanish, then dress her in soft pajamas while telling simple stories. Emma would request Dada halfway through, and Theodore would take over for the final story and goodnight kisses. But Emma always needed Rosa to be in the room too, her small eyes checking to make sure both her people were present. You're good at this, Theodore said one night after Emma had finally drifted off to sleep. They stood in the hallway outside Emma's nursery, speaking in whispers. The whole bedtime thing. Mrs. Patterson used to say it took an hour of crying before Emma would finally give up and fall asleep. Emma didn't like feeling abandoned, Rosa said. She needed the routine, the consistency, the reassurance that we'd both still be here in the morning.
We.
Rosa blushed slightly. I mean you and whoever her caregiver is. But you said we. Theodore studied her face in the dim hallway light. You're part of her life now, Rosa. You don't have to keep pretending you're just an employee. I am just an employee. Is that why you've been sleeping in the chair in her room the past 3 nights when she had that cold? Because you're just an employee? Rosa had no answer for that. The truth was, she'd been terrified when Emma developed a fever. The memories of those early NICU days, of how fragile Emma had been, had come flooding back. She hadn't been able to rest until the fever broke, had needed to be close enough to hear every breath. She's important to me, Rosa finally admitted. More than she should be. Why shouldn't she be? You love her. Love doesn't change what I am, Mr. Whitmore. I'm still the hired help. You're Emma's. Theodore paused, searching for the right word. You're Emma's, Rosa. You're the person she needs. And honestly, that makes you more valuable to this family than any title could suggest. Their eyes met in the darkened hallway, and Rosa felt something shift between them. Not romance. Both of them were too raw, too cautious for that. But recognition. Understanding. The beginning of a partnership built around a shared purpose. Emma's well-being. I should check on my mother, Rosa said, breaking the moment. She wasn't feeling well earlier. How is Maria doing? The treatment working? Better. Your doctors are amazing. She's responding well to the new protocol. Rosa's voice softened. Thank you for that. I know the contract says her care is included, but I want you to know I'm grateful. You're family now, Rosa. Both of you. Family takes care of each other. After Rosa left, Theodore stood in the hallway for a long time, thinking about what he'd just said. Family. When had that shift happened? When had Rosa transformed from an employee into something more essential, more permanent? He thought about the party 6 weeks ago, about all those elegant women who'd been vying for his attention. He'd had dinner with 2 of them since then, Victoria and Sophia, trying to give the dating thing a fair chance. Both evenings had been polite, pleasant, and utterly empty. Victoria had talked about charity galas and social connections. Sophia had discussed art acquisitions and luxury travel. Neither had asked about Emma beyond a polite, "How's your daughter?" Neither had noticed Theodore's tie was on backwards because Emma had pulled on it that morning. Neither had known what to say when he'd mentioned Emma's newest word or her funny habit of organizing her toys by color. But Rosa knew. Rosa understood every developmental milestone, celebrated every small victory, worried over every setback. Rosa spoke about Emma with the kind of detailed knowledge that only came from genuine engagement, from actually being present in a child's daily life. The next morning, Theodore found Rosa in the kitchen with Emma, making breakfast. His daughter was in her high chair, happily smashing banana slices while Rosa prepared oatmeal. "Dada!" Emma shrieked when she saw him, banana-covered hands reaching out. "Good morning, messy girl," Theodore laughed, kissing her sticky forehead before pouring himself coffee. "I made enough oatmeal for everyone," Rosa said, not looking up from the stove. "I hope that's okay. Mrs. Chun is at a doctor's appointment this morning." "More than okay. Thank you." Theodore sat at the kitchen island, watching Rosa move around his kitchen with easy familiarity. "Rosa, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here?" Rosa paused, spoon mid-stir. "That's an odd question." "Is it? You upended your entire life to be here. You left your clients, your apartment, your independence. I need to know if you regret it." Rosa turned to face him fully. "Mr. Whitmore." "Theodore. Please. We're sitting in my kitchen at 7 a.m. while my daughter throws banana at us. I think we're past Mr. Whitmore." A small smile tugged at Rosa's lips. "Theodore, then. Am I happy here? That's complicated." "Why complicated?" "Because happiness isn't the right word for what this is. I'm fulfilled. I'm grateful. I'm terrified. I'm anxious that I'll do something wrong, that Emma will get sick again, that you'll realize this arrangement is crazy and send us away." She scooped oatmeal into a bowl. "But happy? Yes. I'm happy when Emma laughs. I'm happy when she reaches for me in the night because she had a bad dream. I'm happy knowing my mother is getting world-class care. So yes, I suppose I am happy here. But it's the kind of happiness that comes with constant underlying fear that it could all disappear. Theodore absorbed this, understanding the vulnerability it took to admit such things. What would make you feel more secure? I don't know if that's possible. This situation is inherently unstable. You could meet someone tomorrow, fall in love, get married. That person might not want me here. I told you, the contract protects. Contracts can be bought out, Theodore. I know how the world works. If you want me gone, eventually I'll be gone, legal protections or not. Then I need to make you a promise, Rosa. Not a legal one, but a personal one. Theodore waited until she met his eyes. As long as Emma needs you, you have a place in this home. I swear that on Catherine's memory, on Emma's future, on anything you want me to swear it on. You're not going anywhere. Rosa's eyes filled with tears. You can't know what the future holds. No, but I can control my own actions. And I'm choosing to honor what you've done for my daughter, what you continue to do for her every single day. You're part of this family, Rosa. Start believing that. Emma chose that moment to throw her banana bowl on the floor with a triumphant, "Oh." Both adults laughed, the serious moment broken by toddler chaos. But as Rosa cleaned up the mess and Theodore extracted Emma from her high chair, something settled between them. An understanding. A commitment. They were in this together, for better or worse, bound by their shared love for a little girl who needed them both. 6 months later, Emma's second birthday party was everything the anniversary party hadn't been. Instead of elegant society guests, the backyard was filled with children from Emma's new playgroup, their parents, and the household staff who had become like extended family. Rosa stood by the dessert table, watching Emma toddle around with her friends, her Spanish songs mixing with English as she played. The transformation in the child was complete. Emma was confident, happy, social, everything a 2-year-old should be. "You did that," a voice said beside her. Mrs. Chun, who had become Rosa's strongest ally in the household, gestured toward Emma. "That happy child is your doing." "Theodore's been wonderful with her," Rosa protested. "Mr. Whitmore is a good father, yes. But you gave him back his daughter. You gave Emma back her joy." Mrs. Chun patted Rosa's arm. "And you gave this house something it hasn't had in 3 years. You gave it a heart again." Rosa watched Theodore across the yard, holding Emma upside down while she giggled hysterically. He'd changed too over these months. The haunted look had faded from his eyes. He smiled more readily, laughed more often. He'd even started taking Emma to the park on Sundays, just the two of them, building their own bond without needing Rosa as a constant intermediary. "Rosa!" Emma's voice called out. "Rosa, Mira?" Rosa hurried over as Emma showed her a butterfly that had landed nearby. They crouched together, examining it, Theodore joining them to snap photos on his phone. "Beautiful, mi amor," Rosa murmured. "Decay color, yes?" "Azul," Emma declared. "Blue. That's right. Bilingual genius," Theodore teased, ruffling Emma's hair. Later, after the guests had left and Emma was napping, Rosa found Theodore in his study. She knocked softly on the open door. "Come in," he called, looking up from his laptop. "Party was a success." "Thanks to Mrs. Chen's organization," Rosa said. "I just wanted to tell you that I'm taking my mother to her follow-up oncology appointment tomorrow. I'll be back by 3, but if you need me sooner—" "Rosa, I can handle my own daughter for a few hours," Theodore interrupted with a smile. "How is Maria doing?" "The doctors are optimistic. 6 months cancer-free, as of last week." "That's wonderful. You must be relieved." "I am." Rosa hesitated in the doorway. "Theodore, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why haven't you dated? Since that party, I mean. You went out a few times with Victoria and Sophia, but then nothing. Your family keeps asking me if you're okay." Theodore leaned back in his chair, considering his answer. "Honestly, because none of them were right. They wanted the idea of me, the lifestyle, the status. They saw Emma as an accessory to the package. But more than that." He paused. "I realized I was trying to recreate something I'd already lost. Catherine was my partner, my equal. We built something together. These women wanted to be taken care of, to slide into a ready-made life. That's not partnership. That's... I don't know what that is, but it's not what I want. So, what do you want? Theodore looked at her for a long moment.
I want what I have now.
A home where Emma is happy. Where I can be myself instead of performing Theodore Whitmore, CEO. Where people care about each other, not about what they can get from each other. He smiled. You and Maria have been good for us, Rosa. You've made this house feel like a home again. Rosa felt warmth spread through her chest. We're happy here too. My mother keeps saying she's never felt so safe, so cared for. She says you've given her more than medical treatment. You've given her peace. That's all any of us really want, isn't it?
Peace.
Safety. Love. Their eyes met, and Rosa felt that same shift she'd felt in the hallway months ago. But it was stronger now, deeper. Built on months of shared routines, shared concerns, shared joy in Emma's growth. Built on Theodore bringing her coffee in the mornings without being asked, on Rosa knowing exactly how he liked his shirts ironed even though that wasn't her job. Built on 1,000 small moments of consideration and care that had woven their lives together. I should let you work, Rosa said, suddenly flustered. Rosa, wait. Theodore stood, moving around his desk. I need to tell you something. My mother called yesterday. She wants to meet you. She what? She's heard all about you from Emma's pediatrician, from my sisters, from everyone who's seen how happy Emma is now. She wants to meet the woman responsible. That's terrifying. Theodore laughed. She's going to love you. But there's something else. She asked me if there was anything between us. Romantically, I mean. Rosa's breath caught. What did you tell her? I told her no. Because at the time, I believed that was true. We're partners in raising Emma. Friends. Family. He took a step closer. But the truth is, Rosa, I don't know anymore. I don't know what this is between us, but it's more than employer and employee. It's more than friends. You're the first person I think about in the morning, and the last person I want to talk to at night. When Emma does something funny, I can't wait to tell you. When I have a hard day, I want your perspective. And sometimes, when I watch you with Emma, I feel. Theodore, stop. Rosa held up a hand, her heart pounding. Please don't say something you might regret. What if I won't regret it? You're still grieving, Catherine. You're vulnerable. Emma needs stability, not complications from us crossing lines we shouldn't cross. What if the line is already crossed? What if we've been building something all along without realizing it? Rosa wanted to step closer, wanted to let herself believe this could be real. But fear held her back. Fear of losing everything if this went wrong. Fear of not being enough. Fear of her old insecurities about their different worlds. I need to think, she said, echoing the words from 6 months ago. This is too important to rush into. Emma has to come first. I agree. But Rosa, at some point, we get to matter too. You and me. We get to want things for ourselves, not just for Emma. Before Rosa could respond, Emma's voice called out from upstairs, awake from her nap. They both smiled at the familiar sound. We should. Rosa started. Yeah, Theodore agreed. They headed upstairs together, falling into their familiar rhythm. Emma was standing in her crib, arms outstretched. Dada, Rosa. Theodore lifted her out while Rosa straightened the bedding. They moved through the routine they'd perfected over months, changing Emma's diaper, getting her a snack, settling her with toys in the playroom. And all the while, Rosa thought about what Theodore had said.
About wanting things for themselves.
About lines already crossed. That night, after Emma was asleep and her mother was settled in the guest house, Rosa sat in her room and thought about Catherine Whitmore. About the promise she'd made to a dying woman. About whether Catherine would approve of what was developing between Rosa and Theodore. The next morning, Rosa found a photo album on her breakfast tray, something that had never been there before. Inside were pictures of Catherine, young and laughing, pregnant and glowing, holding a newborn Emma with exhausted joy on her face. But tucked in the back was a letter, in Catherine's handwriting. Rosa's hands shook as she unfolded it. To whoever cares for my daughter. If you're reading this, it means I didn't survive Emma's birth. I've written letters for Emma to open as she grows, But I wanted to write one for you too, for whoever takes my place in her life. I know it won't be the same. No one can replace a mother's love. But I hope you'll love her anyway, in your own way. I hope you'll sing to her, read to her, hold her when she cries. I hope you'll celebrate her victories and comfort her defeats. I hope you'll be patient with Theodore. He's a good man, but grief will make him difficult at first. Give him time. He'll come back to himself. And if you're reading this years from now, if you've loved my daughter well, if you've made her happy, thank you. Thank you for doing what I couldn't. Thank you for being there when I can't be. Please don't think you're stealing anything from me. Love isn't finite. Emma can love you and still love my memory. Theodore can care for you and still honor what we had. There's room in our hearts for multiple chapters, multiple loves. If you ever doubt whether you belong in my family's life, remember, you were chosen. Not by me directly, but by fate, by circumstance, by need. And that makes you part of Emma's story. Own it. Embrace it. Don't hide from it out of guilt or fear. Be happy, whoever you are. Make my family happy. That's all I ask. With gratitude, Catherine. Rosa read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Then she went to find Theodore. He was in the kitchen, making breakfast. Emma was in her high chair, babbling contentedly. It was such a normal scene, the kind that had become their daily reality over the past 6 months. Theodore, Rosa said from the doorway. Did you know about the letter? He turned, saw her tears, and understood immediately. I found the album last week while going through Catherine's things. I read the letter. I thought you should see it too. She gives us permission, Rosa whispered. She actually gives us permission to be happy. I know. Theodore set down the spatula and moved toward her. But the question is, do you give yourself permission? Rosa looked at Emma, happily smashing blueberries. Looked at Theodore, patient and kind and offering her something she'd never dared to want. Looked at the life they'd built together over the past 6 months, imperfect and unconventional, but real and full of love. I'm scared, she admitted. I'm terrified of losing this if we try for more, and it doesn't work. I'm scared too, Theodore said. But I'm more scared of looking back in 5 years and regretting that I never tried. That I let fear keep me from something that could be beautiful. Emma chose that moment to throw her bowl on the floor with a triumphant, "Oh." They both laughed, the tension breaking. How about this? Rosa said slowly. We take it slow. We keep Emma's routine stable. We don't rush into anything. But we see where this goes. Together. Together, Theodore agreed, reaching for her hand. Emma clapped her sticky hands together. Dada. Rosa. Together. They all laughed, the sound filling the kitchen with warmth and joy and possibility. 3 years later, Emma's 5th birthday party was held in the same backyard, but everything else had changed. The guest list included Rosa's extended family from Puerto Rico, Theodore's business associates who had become genuine friends, and Emma's kindergarten classmates. Emma herself was a confident, bilingual little girl who introduced her friends to Mommy Rosa and Papa without hesitation, explaining matter-of-factly that her first mama was in heaven but she had another mama who loved her very much. Maria, now in full remission, held court with the other grandparents, telling stories about Emma's toddler years that made everyone laugh. And Rosa stood beside Theodore, his arm around her waist, watching their daughter, because that's what Emma had become, legally, emotionally, in every way that mattered, blow out her birthday candles. Make a wish, mi amor, Rosa called out. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, made her wish and blew. The crowd cheered. What did you wish for? Theodore asked, lifting her into his arms. Can't tell, or it won't come true, Emma said seriously. Then, quieter, but I wished that we'd always be together. All of us. Rosa felt tears prick her eyes. Theodore's arm tightened around her. That's a wish we can definitely make come true, he promised. Later that night, after the guests had left and Emma was asleep, Rosa and Theodore sat on the back porch, watching the stars. Do you ever regret it? Theodore asked. The way we started? All the complications. Rosa thought about the terrified maid at that party 3 years ago, the desperate baby crawling across a ballroom floor, the dark secret that had actually been a love so powerful it transcended loss and time and social boundaries. Not for a second, she said. Every complication, every difficulty, every moment of fear, it was all worth it to get to this.
To us.
To us, Rosa agreed. To Emma. To family. Theodore kissed her temple softly. Catherine would be happy, I think. To see Emma so loved. To see us so happy. I think so too. Rosa rested her head on his shoulder. I talk to her sometimes, in my head. I tell her about Emma's milestones, about her life. I thank her. For what? For trusting me. For the letter. For loving Theodore and Emma so well that, even in death, she made room for more love to grow. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, feeling the peace of a life well built. Inside, Emma slept soundly, surrounded by photos of two mothers, one in heaven and one downstairs on the porch, both of whom loved her more than life itself. And in the morning, their beautiful, complicated, perfect life would begin again.